Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Wolfram Technology Conference 2021. My name is Lou D'Andrea, and today I'm going to be talking about some extensions of attached cells in the Notebook UI. So I'm going to chat about what attached cells are, why they're important, the things that we've done with them, and the things that are new in 13, and the things that are coming post 13. So just as a refresher, why did we develop this thing called attached cells? Well, we needed some way to have a contextual interface that was available only in exactly the spot that it was needed. So for instance, we have a feature canvas that we need some drawing tools. So what's the best way? We used to have drawing tools available in a palette. Now we have this interface that only appears when you're sort of focused on the canvas. Relatively newer feature, we have code analysis tools available. We can analyze this cell, and as this goes off to some code analysis tools developed at Wolfram Research by Brenton Bostic, and uses attached cells to sort of flag that yes, something is going on in this cell, and here's some more information about it. We've used this notion of attaching interfaces in lots of places. It started off in the predictive interface, worked its way up through image editing, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to itemize all of them, but so this is the concept of attached cells, and you can see that they're very useful already. And in last year's conference, I gave a talk that extensively covered what we were exposing to users at that time. So there's a kernel function attached cell that says, I want to attach something to a notebook object, a cell object, someplace in the front end. And I want to display something and details of exactly how to align what I'm attaching with the thing I'm attaching to. So those of you who are interested in reviewing that information, this is the QR code for for the video from last year. Just to review some of the highlights of that talk, attached cells are not part of the notebook model. They're not going to be saved in a notebook, so that canvas doesn't embed itself into the user's saved notebook. The canvas tools, I should say, doesn't embed itself into the saved notebook. Attached cells don't survive anything that involves serialization of this notebook expressions or cell expressions, including copy and paste. And the attachment can contain anything. In the examples we've seen so far, anything is typically controls, but it could be pure annotation. It could be a progress indicator. It could be anything. All of the constructs available in the Wolfram Language typesetting system. Attached cells are drawn over stuff that you've already got in your notebook, which means that's great for Canvas, but it means that if you have multiple things vying for the same position, different attachments at the same spot might cause problems. And we're going to dig into that problem today and see if we can't come up with a solution. And then there's, you can use the function to manually trigger an attachment, or you can tie that function up to initialization or other things to have it automatically appear and automatically disappear. Likewise, we have, we can manually remove attached cells with notebook delete, and automatically remove it in some other cases. So, right. So I want to talk about attachment points briefly. I should have mentioned at the top, if there are questions as I'm going along, please add those questions to the Pathable chat, not to the Zoom chat, and I'll take a look at those, time permitting, at the end of the talk. So attachment points, where are we? Almost any location in a notebook you can attach to. You can attach to a box object, or some part of the box object, or some distance from that part. Attached to the corners of a cell object, or references from that corner. There are a couple of other attachment points that are actually relevant for this talk. Inline is an attachment point below the cell, and it pushes other content out of the way. At the time, it was the only attachment point that pushes other content out of the way. It still is, but we'll see what is coming. And cell bracket is a place, this is a very natural place to want to plunk down interfaces that affect the cell. So we have a cell bracket attachment point for cell objects. Again, we'll talk a lot more about this. And notebook object as a whole is, you can attach to the pieces of the notebook object. And I wanted to point out one thing. I made a point to say almost any location in a notebook. I wanted to highlight the fact that attaching to stuff inside of a docked cell is not supported. It's not encouraged. I think it happened to work on some platforms in some releases, but going forward, we're going to make sure that it doesn't work anywhere until we can make sure that it works everywhere. So if you're attaching content inside of docked cells, don't do that. Right. Okay, so that's past and now present. The new thing that we've added in version 13 is the ability to extract a list of attached cells from the object of attachment. So those of you who know this function know that it returns a cell object. So here I've attached a blob to the evaluation cell, and it displays as a blob and says, this is the cell object corresponding to the attachment. And I can get rid of that manually with notebook delete or automatically with removal conditions and whatnot. But how do you get the cell object for attached cells that you may not know about, or attached cells that already exist, but for which you don't yet have the cell object? So here, this orange cell, I'm going to call cell obj. I'm going to attach a bunch of spots to the cell obj, a bunch of purple spots. And oh shoot, I used do instead of table. I don't have the list of cell objects, and I want to get rid of those purple spots because they were wrong. How do I do that? Well, in version 13, we're going to be adding an attached cell filter to cells, saying, cells is the thing that gives you lists of cell objects. If you point cells at a given cell object and say, give me all the attached cells for that are attached to that cell, it will return the list of cell objects that you need. And then you can get rid of them in the usual way. And just as a quick example, we're attaching multiple cells, not directly to the original cell, but we're nesting. So this arrow is attached to the orange cell. This arrow is attached to this cell. This arrow is attached to this, and so on. We have a chain of attached cells. And again, the cell object, there's only one of those cells that's attached to the cell object. And if we delete it, then the whole chain is severed and all of those cells are deleted. Okay, so that's present. That's coming in version 13. And there's a couple of things that are coming post 13 that I wanted to spend the second half of my chat talking about. I am going to load this super secret function package. And I'm going to be using functions that don't exist anywhere but on my system. In fact, even the rest of the team who have been working on attached cells and what I'm going to be showing you will not recognize the names of some of these functions. And those names will almost certainly change before they are shipped. So what I'm giving you is a sneak peek behind the scenes, behind the curtain of some things that are still being researched and developed. There will be Wolfram language code on the following slides, but you should consider it pseudocode. There's no need to remember any of the function names I'm about to show you yet. And they won't even work for you unless you have, a front end post 13 and a kernel post 13. So with those caveats, let's dive into the future. So I think I showed this last year, but it's worth showing again. A light box is something that's intended to grab the eye to illuminate a single thing in a sea of other things. So we have a light box here. And what it does is it sort of dims the rest of the notebook and then provides information in a way that is pretty hard to miss if you're the user looking at this notebook. You know where we want your eye to be drawn. And you can imagine using this for inline versions, in notebook versions of dialogues. In fact, this is going to be rather important for dialogues on mobile platforms where we fundamentally don't have a multi-window model. We sort of only have a single notebook window. So providing attached cells and light boxes like this are going to become more and more important in that world. And in fact, Cloud already uses the HTML version of a light box, something like a light box, for things like create dialogue in our language. automatically calling forth a second layer on top of a cloud notebook. So that the approach should be sort of familiar to folks already. And I'll give one more example illuminating the lightbox. So here's a simple manipulate that produces a grid of buttons, and those buttons are associated with particular categories of example data. So let's see, for a given category of example data, it's going to show buttons for each of the items in that category. So all of the aerial images and example data are listed here. And if we click on one of them, it's going to display, the payload of that example data in a lightbox. So breaking free of the manipulate shackles and displaying things on sort of a larger canvas. Very handy, lightweight way to draw some attention to the important bits. Right, so that's Lightbox. And the next feature I want to talk about is a response to a problem that we're pretty lucky to have. So problem is this. We've already seen cases where we want to have attached cells near the cell bracket. And this is fine. We started, as I said, with the suggestions bar, which in its minimized state looks a little bit like that. And then we developed on cloud, there's this menu, there's a gear menu that appears as you're hovering over near the cell bracket region. And that's fine, but now we need code that makes sure that these two things don't ever draw in the same spot. And then, well, for other products, we have still more attached cells near the cell bracket. In Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition, we have some help utilities and some toggling utilities that start populating this area even more. We've seen code analysis wanting to use the same space. And even in last year's talk on attached cell, I suggested, or noted that it was possible to attach stuff near the cell bracket that you might be using as a progress indicator. But all of this is going to lead to all kinds of overcrowding, and it's only going to get worse as we, in our cleverness, design more and more interfaces to attach near the cell bracket. So how do we get out of this problem of having people want so much stuff by the cell bracket? Well, our solution that we've been developing for a while, it's not quite ready for 13. Some pieces are in 13. But it's this notion of a cell tray, where each cell is going to have a region near the cell bracket where we can assemble various attached interfaces, which we're calling widgets. So the cell tray framework is, it involves new attachment point management. So the front end automatically handles, avoiding overlaps. It's going to have some new persistence characteristics, which I'll talk about. And it's going to be shipped with a bunch of new attached interfaces and the ability possibly to have your own interfaces added to that set. So let me demo now what this looks like in the current development builds of Mathematica from the future. So cell trays, there's a couple of different things that you can have in there. You can still have the regular old attached cells that are temporary. So the same, ephemeral attached cells that you've always had. But the important thing here is we have automatic layout that avoids overlaps. So this is the old world where we attach straight to the cell bracket. Let's see, here's a cell. Here I'm attaching the string 1 near the cell bracket. Okay, that's fine. I have something else near the cell bracket. Oh, well, that's not so good. It wrote over the same spot. If I have more, it's just going to create a bigger and worse display. So how are we solving this problem? Well, in the future, there's going to be a way to attach cells to this tray, or I think of it as attaching to a tray. So we have cell tray, that's a little small, but perhaps you can see the one appear, and now I'm going to attach another thing to it, and it's automatic. The front end has automatically created sort of a row of these things, and another one, And so, well, this is already better than what we had before as far as, getting things associated with getting things assembled near the cell tray. And this being a talk, I did a little bit of thinking about what might you want to use these temporary cell tray insertions for, and thought, well, common problem that I have is knowing, I have a bunch of cells evaluating. How do I know the one that's currently evaluating, especially if I've, evaluated cells out of order in a notebook and all the cell brackets are lit up? How do I tell which is the currently evaluating cell? Well, attaching to the cell tray is a very nice way to do that. And in fact, with cleanup is the perfect system function for setting this up. We have, a setup and a teardown, and in between that, we have the evaluation that the user wants done. So the setup attaches something to the cell bracket, say this is the currently evaluating cell. The pause completes, and then the cell is deleted. Well, and that arrow is fine, but it doesn't quite draw my eye in the same way that something with a little bit of motion would. So here is, I've just built a little function that draws a little pulsating spot near the side. And if we evaluate, a bunch of these things, we see which is the currently evaluating cell, and I evaluate a couple of these other ones so that we don't know which is which. And we can see, in a clearer way, which is the one that's currently evaluating. So you could tell this by carefully watching the in labeling, but I find the spot labeling to be a little bit clearer. And here I'm just demonstrating that these things can be nested, and the front end automatically handles the overcrowding problem. Another thing I thought might be useful is if you could have tools near the cell bracket that would let you view a way to abort the evaluation, or an elapsed time counter. So I'm going to take this opportunity to say, well, there are some named, I assembled these examples as named attached cells, named widgets that are defined in some file in my layout that you don't have. And then the with cell tray monitor is a utility that merely, during the evaluation of this, will show the abort and the timer. Actually, I guess I can show what abort looks like. Stops. It's going to be a clickable stop sign, and the timer is just going to be this little thing that counts up. So during evaluation of this, we have the abort button and the timer, and then when that evaluation completes, those things go away. And if we have a longer running evaluation, and okay, I don't want to wait for this thing to complete, I can say, all right, I can type command dot, I can go to the menu, or I can just, if I'm a mouse user, just say, okay, abort this. So some nice, I think, little utilities for making life easier using this new cell tray location. One of the other nice things about cell trays is that they're going to give us the ability to have attached cells that are more persistent in nature. So because kernels are temporary, but notebooks are forever. So we have this notion of a cell option in which you can specify various items from our widget library to be associated with cells with that cell. One of the benefits of using a cell option is that you can set these things in style definitions. So for instance, in the code cell style for this talk, I've added a little evaluate button to the side. So if I have some new code cell, every code cell is going to get one of these evaluate buttons. And in the future, yes, in the future, they might be available, but not always shown. And what I mean by that is, again, think of the gear menu on cloud that only appears when you happen to be pointing at the cell with your mouse cursor. So maybe we'll only do it when a cell has focus, whether with the mouse or with the keyboard. Maybe we'll have a way to display things when some other condition is met, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then some other, as soon as you have more than one of these things, you're going to want to control the sorting of them. You're going to want to store possibly metadata associated with them, and so on. So this option that we're developing is going to allow us a place to do that. And then we're going to be building out a set of named interfaces as well. and I'll demo a couple of those. One that's been being worked on by Kevin Daly is essentially looks a lot like what the cloud has as the gear menu, which I've mentioned a couple of times. But it's a menu that, in fact, it looks a lot like what the cloud is using, and it can be used to interact with common operations on this cell. So that's cool. Even cooler, though, is something that Kevin's been working on to handle cell tag management. So used to be the case if you wanted to add or delete cell tags for a cell, you select the cell, you go cell tags, add, remove cell tags, brings up a dialog in which you can see stuff in the notebook. And let's see, I had some tags already for that cell. I'll add a new one. So now this cell has its cell tag, and I can show those cell tags via some other way. But wouldn't it be nice if there were just some way for this cell to advertise that there were cell tags at a glance? And this is what Kevin's been doing. So if we have a cell tag widget in development, and imagine this widget only appears on cells that actually have cell tags associated with them. Might only display when some other condition is met. That condition might be this cell contains cell tags. And then this widget, when clicked, shows the cell tags for that cell and provides an interface right there for interacting with the cell tags in that cell. So you can add cell tags, you can remove them, you can edit them, and so on. All without leaving the notebook display, all without bringing up a separate dialog. And then we dismiss it by clicking on the tag, and it goes back to its minimized state. So very nice concept, I think, for adding cell tags. And again, in preparation for this talk, I thought about what other kinds of things we might want for our library of these widgets. So there's gear and tags, and I'm showing them on the same cell just so that as proof that the front end continues to take care of layout. There's the evaluate button that I added to my code cells. Maybe we would want a copy down button for making copies of inputs and outputs if they're important. An interface for investigating the options. Why is this cell this font or this font size? And this might contain all of the options for the output cell, output style. We might also have some, this is just a simple listing, but we might provide some more expansive interfaces for that. And we might provide help buttons that are specific for, that look at the actual expression being represented in the cell and show the symbols involved in that. And just to round out the list, I sort of, made a little favoriting widget that just lets you, label a cell with a little indicator to remind yourself that this cell is important for some reason. So those are some directions we might be going. And a quick example just that shows, again, you don't have to look at the code, but that shows that the front end manages the temporary interfaces and the permanent interfaces in a convenient way. So it orders them and makes sure there's no overlaps and deletes the ones that when they're finished running. Right. So that's cell tray. We'd be happy to hear feedback about it at this afternoon's front-end office hour. So if you're interested in this, if you have questions that I can't get to in the last few minutes here, feel free to come there and give us a call. And I want to give credit where credit is due. The lead developer for the cell tray stuff is Jason Abernathy. I've already mentioned Kevin Daly's name as the widget wizard, and of course Ian Hojnicki and John Foltz as the the architect and director of user interfaces. Okay, well, we also intend to be doing other things with the attached cell notion. I think someone asked the question at a different talk I was in about how do we rename iconized objects interactively. That's something that we're intending to do. That's a feature that we're intending to add by using attached cells in a clever way. Other interactive annotations and other kinds of things. And if you all have ideas, then that would be awesome. Otherwise, that completes what I wanted to talk about. So now I guess I will go to the Pathable chat and see if there are questions. So there's a question, will there be some front-end preference setting to automatically include abort, timer, and so on? That's an interesting question. I don't think we've figured any of that out yet. I could imagine that being done in a couple of ways. Yes, that could be an option, or it could be kernel state, because the abort and timer things are fundamentally kernel related. You're not going to have an abort and a timer as they've sort of remained here, but they're really temporary things that should only be appearing during evaluation. And if we're happy with these, then we may well make them available automatically in some way. Of course, the more permanent the gear menu and other menus, we intend to attach to style definitions and then use the cell focus and other conditions to make them appear automatically, so you don't have to do anything to see them. They will just be part of the styles for these new cells. Can you get to the cell tray by a keyboard shortcut? I don't know the answer to that. I think the answer is probably no, because they're just attached cells. And you're talking about using keyboard navigation to get to an attached cell. I mean, I'd be curious to know what workflow you're actually interested in for that question. And I see that John's already, in fact, responded to that, saying that input fields are, sort of the one and only thing that we have focus for at the moment. Can the tray be tiled or vertical instead of horizontal? Yes, I mean, one thing I haven't shown is some of the directions that we're going for the look of the cell tray. We're already talking about having a 2-row tray for various kinds of things that might be attached. And whether I think the horizontal layout makes a little bit more sense because it's more likely to stay within the geography of the cell. So, if we had 4 or 5 blobs here, it would spill out if it went vertical, but not if it went horizontal. Another idea for a cell tray item, a change star that can indicate whether a cell has changed. That's interesting. Thank you for that. Will the tray cover cell content? Is a question. And I think as currently implemented, it does. But I think the question is whether the cell tray will, so if it were to interact with the contents of a cell, what should get priority? Should the front end relay out the cell so that the content is word wrapped? Should it give priority to the interfaces? These are things that I'm not sure we've figured out yet. Okay. The cell has been evaluating a long time, might be interesting. Right, so we could definitely, so there are features in monitor, for instance, that only bring up the monitor, the kernel function monitor, that only bring up the monitor if after a certain number of seconds. So one could certainly imagine, adjusting my pseudocode here for this with cell tray monitor to only pop up if it's been going for a minute or 2 or something. Right, so I think that takes us to the end of our half hour. If there are additional things that you want to chat about, please bring them to the front end notebook UI office hour this afternoon. Otherwise, thank you much for your attention, and I'll talk to you soon.